Bruce.
Hey, this is really a mess.
Yeah, what's up?
Being outside and then like it was all great, and then my wife opened the door, and now the wireless networks are competing for for which one was going to work,
Oh,
and
I
now
see.
it's like
Yeah.
very. And now I'm on the other connection. I don't know how well this is going to work, but
He says, I don't know how well this is going to work, but nice froze. What was the influence to want to go outside?
I just want to have a cigar.
Yeah.
That was my plan tonight. My plan is ruined.
we can make this episode the GOP convention episode.
What does that do for us?
I don't know, nothing. There's
Oh, I
just
see.
nothing else to talk about. I'm like going through everything. There's like not a whole lot. I mean, we could do the gun control thing that you're talking about.
Or anything else. It doesn't matter.
Is this going to the same YouTube link or is this a new YouTube link too?
I think it's a new YouTube link now, which is a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem.
Yeah, because when it doesn't keep the broadcast for the live shows. You have to if your show's down for too long, then it will not work because the old one becomes a processed show and they have to process the link and everything.
Yeah, that link's gone, so I'm gonna need a new one.
Yeah, put it up there on my Facebook, and then I'll send you a link in the chat there. There you go.
Yeah.
I gotta get if I'm gonna do anything outside, I have to get an outdoor access point. The insulation of the house, the walls, and the glass destroys Wi-Fi signal going outside.
It's the glass that does it, huh?
Glass is an insulator for Wi-Fi. So basically, my house is like a Faraday cage compared to outside. So everything inside's fine. If you go outside the cage, you're not going to get in or out of that and turn the signal.
Huh. You can't hard line right into the repeater, can you? Bruce? Bruce, you can't just Ethernet into the repeater, can you? Daggum.
Hello?
Hey.
Yeah.
There you are. You can't just Ethernet into the repeater, can you?
The repeater's not functioning the way it should, which is the problem. But now I'm fine. I just opened the door. I don't care. Can't smoke cigar. That's the way it goes.
Okay. Now it's just kind of cutting out a little bit.
Should be better. I just checked my speed. It looks fine now.
Okay.
Yeah. Good now. Serious pain.
Let's do this. Talk. We are live and interactive.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the good signal now. Yep.
do that. I'm going to do this.
I mean, nobody shows up. It's just a podcast then at that point.
Yeah, will we still get the recording from YouTube?
Yeah, for this one, yeah.
Sweet. Okay. Did you share it into the BC pod or BC
No.
club?
Now, do you want to do that?
Sure. They already hate me enough over there.
They do?
Well, it was my comment that spurred that guy to like flip.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Bruce, what's your company's website?
Neat.com, N-E-A-T.
Just neat.com.
I work for, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I work for.
It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
You're a system admin there.
DevOps engineer, sysadmin, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, while this is all happening, the threads on my mic boom stand have worn to the point where only like 2 threads work, so it's hanging by a literal thread. And so now I have to get some plumber's tape to fix that.
Nice.
And that was happening while I was trying to troubleshoot this.
All right.
Just awesome. Dynamite. All right. Let's see here. Yeah, let's start. If you're ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
This is the Christian Pig Podcast Network. On air.
Christian Pig Podcast Network. Now talk it out, 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 now talk it out. Yeah, Tyler talk it out. Josh talk it out. Justin talk it out. Bruce talk it out. Yeah, now talk it out, now talk it out, now talk it out, now talk it out.
Welcome, everybody, to the Talk It Out podcast. We have a special episode today. And by special episode, I mean it is just me and my friend and fellow Seattleite, Bruce.
Hey, guys.
We have no Tyler, who you're used to hearing at the beginning of the episodes, and we have no Josh for 2 weeks in a row. Bruce, what's going on? Are they just leaving us, or we're losing them left and right?
I don't know what's going on. I think they're otherwise preoccupied with life and jobs and all those sorts of things. But you know, they're clearly not making us a priority.
Well, that's their problem, not ours. We got business to handle today, don't we? I mean, man, there's pretty much nothing going on in the news except, I don't know, the whole GOP convention. I mean, what is that even? Who knows?
Party. It's yeah, I don't know. It's been an interesting day or two now, and I think it's in Cleveland, the GOP convention.
Yep.
And I think the Democratic one is in Philly, which was next week or something. This weekend, I don't remember. I don't really care because I'm not a fan of either party, but it's been like a circus, which is funny. It's sort of like some of the best entertainment on TV if you want to laugh.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of, if you might remember kind of my stance on this when we, the presidential election, it was still a few candidates, and that's what I was saying. I was saying this whole thing is kind of like a reality show, and it's really panning out to be just that way. So we're going to talk about 2 different things in our modified rounded out segment. So let's go ahead and let's get things rolling. We're just going to jump right in, kind of a GOP edition of Rounded Out.
I'm not a writer.
Okay.
All right. Something that just dawned on me, Bruce. Did anyone even know what GOP stood for before, like, I don't know, 4 months ago?
People, I bet you the mass public didn't. When I say mass public, like your millennials and typical social media poster type people. I'm sure they didn't. I mean, I don't think people have always considered him Republican, so that's just the way they see it. And they don't really call it GOP once they're elected, so I'm guessing that's why.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I mean, you only hear that term thrown around like early on in the election process.
Yeah, and also like last election. So it's been 4 years since the last election, obviously, but Obama's been in office for 8 years, and the last election was not a lot of people showed up to the polls at all. Romney was a really poor candidate in terms of like getting lots of traction for his in the mass world. So he wasn't
Right.
covered a lot on other media outlets outside of the conservative ones. And with Trump being what he is, I think it's just exploded the reach of the GOP and the way things work in the Republican Party. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's part of it. And so he gets a lot of media coverage on lots of other outlets. So it's been easy to hear about it because of what's been the case with him. So everyone calls him a racist and everything else. So it's a fun election in terms of the amount of media coverage. So I think that's probably why people know what GOP is.
Yeah, it has been fun for sure, and something that is really kind of taken social media by storm and the whole media sphere in general is that Donald Trump's wife, her speech, right, and the potential plagiarism that was involved. So get people a little up to speed. Basically, his wife gave a speech that was almost verbatim the same as Michelle Obama's on August 25th, 2008. And so everyone's kind of talking about it. Is it plagiarism? Is it good? Is it bad? Latest update I found was that there's some articles saying that basically no one's getting fired over it, which I found really interesting.
Well, one of the things I think that's happening with it is that now that we've seen this, it's opening up the world of speech writing. And this isn't the first time this has happened to people that have given speeches. We've definitely seen this with other people, and even Obama years ago.
Right.
There's been comparative speeches that he's done that have been just as if you want to say plagiarized.
Yeah.
And in word for word almost in some of the writing. So I'm pretty sure this is just going to expose the whole speech writing process, basically, is what I think is going to happen.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the interesting thing about this election in general is that there seems to be a lot of those kind of things, those normal narratives that we kind of miss in politics or that
Right.
people don't think about. A lot of that's getting exposed because of how polarized this election has been. With when you have faces as big as Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, people are so adamant against the other side that suddenly they care about all these nuances that no one even thought about before.
Yeah. And I think that's good because hopefully people will get some informed. But what's also, I think, is going to be a little bit of a backlash with this is now that they've opened up this whole Pandora's box of speech writing, and a lot of people are like throwing stones from the left for the Democratic side, they're now going to open themselves up for as much criticism, and it'll be proven that plagiarism in terms of like speech writers and people borrowing ideas and borrowing word for word is just going to be exposed now amongst all parties.
Right.
And the other thing is, if you don't like Trump and you don't want him to be elected, you have to stop giving him the time of day. And his wife who made the speech is all over news outlets at this point, social media posts, etc. And so what are you going to have? You're trending Trump. And so there's no such thing as bad publicity, and I think that's definitely what's happening here.
Yeah. He does seem to be capitalizing on that a lot. And then now that, the other bit of big news today is that he has the official nomination, Donald Trump does, representing the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And so now that he's the official rep, I've been eager to kind of see how the the one-on-one debates will start manifesting themselves out. As we all know, that Hillary Clinton has some, depending on where you stand on it, she has some potential baggage that she's bringing into this series, and we've seen that Donald Trump has historically taken advantage of any little piece that you give him. And so it'll be really interesting to see how Donald Trump ends up, utilizing all this baggage against Hillary Clinton, and to see how aggressive he gets with it.
Yeah, I think you'll see the same thing happen with the debates that you've already seen. I think that I think it's just going to be another show of how incompetent both of these people really are. And it's just going to be a bunch of talking points. Well, I mean, at this point, we should probably just fast forward to to November and give Hillary the election. Is my opinion.
Yeah, totally.
But I'm excited about third party. Hopefully the Libertarian candidate will get quite a few more votes, and if he gets enough, 15%, he'll be in the debates. So, and it's pretty close at this point. And lots of Republicans and liberals, Democrats, have decided not to vote for the candidate. So they either won't show up to the poll, or they'll vote third party, which will be great. Because we aren't a two-party only system. It's just favored that way at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as a self-proclaimed libertarian, Bruce, would you say that this is maybe the strongest that the Libertarian Party is looking? Because I know that, in our generation, that there's a lot of people who, they're strongly considering just skipping the voting process, because it seems like the lesser of all the evils, so to speak. Now, so you would make an argument then that perhaps voting Libertarian or voting third party is not a lost vote. Is that what you say?
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, a lost vote would mean a vote that you didn't make at all. If you're passionate about change or being a part of the voting process in America as a right, you should be voting. And so the Libertarian Party has gotten a lot more exposure because of obviously social media. People are growing up. And the people that are growing up are the next generation of voters, are reading, Reddit, are reading Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, whatever. And people are pretty tired of this, like, this division sort of thing that's going on. So they've done a good job of dividing the country in half, and it makes for good TV because, a football game is a team, two teams, right? It's not three teams.
Yeah.
You pick a side, and so it's the same deal. Having a third party in there really shakes it up a little more, but it's always been there. And this is probably one of their stronger candidates, hopefully, since Ross Perot, if you ask me. It's fun to see a newer party or another party get so much traction. So I definitely wouldn't say that like you're throwing your vote away. You are exercising your right. And I mean, it's the same sort of argument that Second Amendment folks use. It's a right to bear arms. They're exercising it. They're carrying, open carrying, whatever. The same thing applies to voting. If you want to exercise your right to vote, do it and be proud of it. Don't stay home. And I think eventually we'll probably see an online voting, which will make it even easier. They don't have to go out to a poll, or deal with voting. They'll register, they'll have a number, and they'll do it online.
Yeah.
That'll be the eventual goal of that. But then there's all sorts of other things that come into play when you're talking about online voting.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
So have you voted since you've been eligible? So you've been through 2 elections, right? Or 1?
Yes. 2. Yeah, I turned the age of voting the year that Obama was elected.
Right. So this is pretty pivotal for people in your generation. It's just 2 in. There's another party that you may not have heard about. Now you have some more options, and there's plenty of other parties too. I don't want to just say Libertarian's the only one. There's Green Party, there's other independents. I'm not a Green Party fan, but at the very least you can exercise your right. And it's funny because it's a Christian dude, which there's no no surprise that I'm a Christian on this show. It's hard
I
because
thought all
people,
Christians were Republicans, though.
right, isn't that's the hard one, because you're somehow pigeonholed as a Republican,
Yeah.
and people don't really understand when you start to not be conservative enough for them, or you're too liberal for them, whatever the case may be, you know. And so I was talking about this earlier today, and I don't know, maybe you can kind of get in on this too. The Christian communities in a lot of churches, pastors will get on their on their pulpit, and they basically will start getting the political thing going, because I think they assume that all members of the church subscribe to the same morals they do, and
Right.
principles, and those principles have to apply in all aspects of your life, including politics, according to them. I mean, what do you think? Have you seen that, like, in other churches? Like, how do you feel about that?
I have. I mean, I've been to church services where, I guess, as you put it, where a pastor almost assumes that the congregation agrees with things they say. And the way that becomes evident is how matter of fact and plainly they would say something, as if everyone does agree. And I think right now is kind of a time where those assumptions really kind of have to be thrown out the window, in my opinion. I mean, right now more than ever, I think that the Republicans, or maybe the religious right as a whole, is very confused. I think when you throw someone like Donald Trump, who has extremely questionable morals, out there, and he's the one representing the Christian party, right? So what do we do? And there are a lot of pastors out there who are kind of forcibly saying that they're supporting Trump. Whether or not they believe that, I don't know. Maybe they're just bringing an opinion because they have to.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say, but I don't know. I think it'd be pretty beneficial if pastors were maybe a little bit more honest and could speak to the confusion that a lot of people are having. I know a lot of Christian people who do care about the political process, and they maybe feel stuck right now. They say, well, I don't feel right voting for Trump based on the
Right.
things he says, the things that he believes,
Right.
but surely can't vote Hillary
Right.
because of, for maybe obvious reasons. But
Sure.
I mean, I do know a lot of people in my generation were very keen into Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
So now that he's out and uh, apparently endorsing Hillary,
Yeah.
that just leads to more confusion. Like, what do we
Well,
kind of do here?
Yeah, and that's interesting. Like, if you're gonna play devil's advocate, or let's just put on the Bernie hat for a second, and let's say we're a Bernie supporter. You gotta think, like, you're not surprised that he says Hillary is his go-to, right? I mean,
For sure.
He's a part of the Democratic Party. He's not an independent. He slammed Hillary for a few things, but he never really dug into her hard.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I feel like if you're a Bernie fan, you got to be upset that he didn't dig into Hillary hard enough during their debates and really expose her even more so. And there's a lot of conspiracies around why he would or would not do that. But he's a part of the Democratic Party, and he plays ball,
Yeah.
and he's an older guy. I assume he wants to be reelected in the Democratic Party. I mean, I don't know, but it's a Senate seat, there's that piece. And I don't, it's just, it's funny. I saw a couple of funny posts people made, and they said, hey, Bernie was trying to get people free tuition and free education. Well, I think he gave them a free education about the political parties, and their affiliations and their responsibilities to their allegiance, and what are you going to do? I mean, you can write him off. You can say, well, he played the game, and that's the deal. I would not be a fan of that, whole playing the party system. You got to stick to your principles and stick to yourself, and that's all there is to it. And if you don't get voted in, then at least you have your principles.
Yeah, and I know that there was a lot of speculation with Ben Carson about the same thing on the GOP side, that he did a lot of slamming of Donald Trump and some of the other candidates while he was in the race, and then almost the second he dropped out, he was suddenly buddy with Donald.
Yeah.
So there's that, and that, gosh, there's just a lot that's being like I said earlier, kind of being exposed or brought to light that, and I think, perhaps Bernie did have a lot to do with that, kind of exposing a lot of this stuff in the political process and the different interests and the game behind it, and whether or not Bernie was a part of it maybe is unavoidable. Who knows? But, I think that overall that's a good thing. I think that for voters and for citizens to be empowered, at least with knowledge about how things are a lot more convoluted and maybe more hidden than we can see. In the end, I think that kind of thing would be beneficial. Now, if Bernie himself was just a big part of the puzzle that's hiding things even more, the idea is kind of scary, but it's really hard to know. And I think maybe that's a lot of what's causing people, the millennials, to be so confused about this. Not only do they have these two big heads of people who are strongly opposing one another in Hillary and Donald, but we also, as you're getting a little bit more of a clue of how the political process goes, it's kind of overwhelming a little bit, wouldn't you say? And you
Yeah,
think, wow, do I really trust what I'm seeing on television? Do I really trust the internet? Do
right.
I, am I actually supporting X candidate by buying an iPhone? Who knows? Are the things I'm seeing on my iPhone actually influencing me in subtle ways to be against this policy?
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
I think that only contributes to the kind of chaos, so to speak, that we're having.
I would say that people definitely need to question whatever they see anywhere. And so it's funny, there's been a recent influx again. This happened a while ago, but it's happening again of some posts where people will post a headline that's outrageous. Have you seen this? And then but the article itself is a troll post. So
Yeah.
it says, it'll say something outlandish like, it's discovered aliens or something, but it'll look legit, like from a legit news source. You open the article, you'll start reading a teeny bit, and you start getting into the meat of it, and it's a joke. It's basically
Yeah.
proving that people get their news information from headlines.
Yep.
And and that's the unfortunate part of the internet, I guess. And it's not necessarily just the internet. I think that probably happened all the time, right? If newspapers, hearsay, it's basically the Facebook and Twitter. It's basically the bathroom wall, right?
Yeah.
It's just crap people have thrown on there, written on there with their feces or their or their marker, and people
Yeah.
are reading it and like it gets in, and it's interesting to them because maybe it hits on something they're interested in, and they're like, hey, did you hear such and such? And there's no proof. It's just fun to stir the pot, talk about it, wish for it. And the same thing is the case with these with blog posts or things like that. And then there's the other thing that comes to mind is like, well, hey, why don't you just Google it? Well, Google is prioritizing search results based on
Yeah.
interests, algorithms, all those sorts of things. So even Google or any other search engine is possibly bias.
Right. Yeah.
So I think you just have to get as many sources as possible. I mean, if you ever did a research paper in high school or college, you needed a bibliography and a works cited, you know what I mean? And you needed to do a lot of research from many, many, many sources before you came to a conclusion or supported your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that has to be the case. And it's hard because there's so many things that we care about now that you have to pick and choose your battles, right? And so that kind of comes back to what I'm saying in the church. People they're picking and choosing their battles, and the battle they're choosing is politics. I mean, I don't know if that's worthy of your time. You know what I mean?
Totally. And I mean, that's a whole discussion in and of itself, what the church should be doing with their time and their resources as a
Right.
whole other thing, for
Right.
sure.
And
Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting point, and I kind of want to segue a little bit. Since this is Talk It Out, and there's really no holds barred on topics. We pull out all the stops and we talk it out. And you can check us out on Patreon if you're interested in what we're doing. We have some hosting costs for the website, helps us out on production costs. And what is it? Just Talk It Out Pod, right, on Patreon?
Yeah, or you can just find it right on our website at talkitoutpod.net.
Yeah. And
Yep.
so like going into like where should the church put their resources? It's an interesting point. in terms of like tithing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of philosophies based on tithing, and one of the things that my wife and I were talking about was like, hey, we're tithing, right? And what do you think would happen if we didn't tithe to the church nearly as much, and we put our tithe into an individual specifically?
Yeah.
So you're basically you're tithing for Sunday morning type things, and hopefully your church has outreach programs, and missions that, you know, your pool of money is much stronger than just your own, and your resources are stronger, so you can reach more people and help
Yeah.
them. But like, how much more specific could you get with your money over $200 or something?
Mm-hmm.
You could provide food for a needy family maybe for an entire month, maybe, you know what I mean? Or you could
Yeah.
maybe buy a specific item for somebody that's in need, or you could take some of that money and you know, take a trip to somebody's home that maybe isn't close enough to go to church, and you go to them, you know, all those sorts of things. It's an interesting discussion, and it's not something we can solve here, but I just kind of wanted to bring it up, you know, as like a, hey, where does the church spend their resources? You know, politically on the pulpit, you know, money wise, time, you know, those
Yeah.
are big questions.
Yeah, I get, I've been a churchgoer basically since my early teens. And, it wasn't until I started getting a little bit older that I started to really, get a little freaked out when I really started to think about, the big church, the mega church. We're certainly not going to be talking about religious topics, every episode, but, we are a part of the Christian Pig network. So I think maybe we're obligated to, maybe they make us do that kind of stuff. Because that was certainly on the agenda today. But when it comes to tithing, I think the business model that the church kind of, the capital C church, or is it the lowercase c? I'm not sure. The church building, the business model for church, systems right now is, we're the church. We have the pastor, we have the music, we have, maybe we have the know-how, and we have the connections. So if you pay us, we will use your money for God,
Yeah.
through our connections, through the means that we have.
Yeah.
If we put our money together, we can then, use it. Now, I think that's an interesting model when you look at it as a system. But, what if, maybe what if we took the phrase, that the church is not just four walls and a roof.
Right.
What if the church, and what if it meant to tithe to the church was, it's bigger than that. What if I've wrestled around with different ideas, especially since, I've been married, and you kind of are more strategic with your finances. You probably know how that is.
Right.
And, start to think, is it really actually useful to have a certain amount of money that I set aside to give to a particular church building,
Mm-hmm.
or a particular church system amongst the many of them? Or perhaps would it be more useful? And this is maybe a question for you. Do you think that it would be more useful if, instead of people being encouraged to give to a particular building that they go to,
Mm-hmm.
what if each of those individuals was using that money to do those things that the church says they're going to do?
Right. So in other words, you take the money and you put it into the specific
Right.
cause,
So,
specifically, and not just a large pool that is divvied up. And maybe the church would have like a month or a year where the money goes to one thing, right? And that would be, that's our target, that's our intentions, and that's how it could go. There's a
right.
lot of models for that, but
Yeah.
you know,
If you
it's
really kind of
interesting.
break it down, I mean, I work for a marketing company,
Right.
a sales and marketing company, and here's what we do. We approach, in our case, manufacturers, and we say, hey, we will sell, distribute, and market your product for you.
Mm-hmm.
And, so we'll take the money, and, we'll get a portion of it,
Right.
and we'll do what you could already do if you wanted to spend the time to do it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't want to call the church a middleman,
Right.
but in some ways, sometimes it feels that way, you know, especially, and I think that's really put into light when you look at, you know, the big time pastors who have tons of money,
Mhm.
and you know, that can lead into a whole different thing. But you know, I just think about, you know, a percentage of every tithe dollar goes into a pastor's income,
Mhm. Yep.
you know, maybe music income,
Mhm.
and then it gets filtered through there, and then so there's some percentage that goes that, and then it starts going to the thing that the church is doing,
Right.
right? And so, you know, everyone's all about efficiency and cutting out the middleman. So I think it's that kind of mindset that makes me wonder, you know, perhaps it would be more efficient, and you know, if we're going to use the Christian term, you know, better for the kingdom,
Mhm.
if the money is going straight to what it's supposed to be doing and not being filtered through the, you know, gosh, I'm trying to avoid saying this, but like the church marketing company. You know what I'm saying? I'm kind of on fire today. I think I'm doing a good job.
Can be that you you kind of like, is it fair to say that they are a business, right? And
You
that's
kind
kind
of
of,
have to.
yeah.
I mean, in a lot of ways, you kind of have to. I mean, this is a job, you know, and I think you have to be real, and you know, and this is even you have to appreciate what a pastor does. It's a job.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, you know, as a church, you're also supporting the pastor and his family, right? So you could see it, and if you're going to say, hey, I could take my money and go support a family, well, you are supporting a family with the pastors of the church, and
Yeah.
the people that are in leadership or paid. You're supporting them in their income, and then you have faith that they are doing the right things based on what calling that God has put in their hearts, and that's another topic, and you could definitely take it that way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you
And
know,
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. You
right,
know,
right.
I think that if you wanted to get on to, you know, how things were in the early church, and if you really want to get into the grassroots of Christianity, you know, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. I mean, there were heads of cities, there were heads of the community that did the preaching, and that people would support them, and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it. What I think I would like to see, though, and I think that tithing is maybe just the easy thing to point at, but I think what I would like to see is maybe a more ownership from church goers. And I think this is not a new issue. I think this is not anything revolutionary. You know, like you said, we're not solving anything necessarily.
Right.
Um, but I definitely would like to see. I don't want to see people say, I gave my 10%, which we know that statistically it's a lot less than 10%. You know, but say I give my 10%, and now the pastor is going to go do the stuff that you know, in reality Jesus calls me to do,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to call that good. You know, and I think maybe we should just own our faith a little bit more, and you know, don't just subscribe to, hey, I need a marketing company to do, because I don't want to put the time and effort into doing it myself.
Right, right. And that's really a good parallel. The people, I think people believe that,
Yeah.
and that's the way they act. But I
Yeah.
mean, not to beat a dead horse with this, I guess. Um, I was gonna maybe bring up another topic that's also
Yeah, let's go ahead.
controversial. Um,
Before we get into that, we'll do a quick plug. If you want to give to the family, your family of the Talk It Out podcast, go to talkitoutpod.net. Goes right to our Patreon. We have several different perk packages. If you want to give, we give back to you. So go to talkitoutpod.net, click the support us, check out the packages we have, and join up with us. What do you got for us, Bruce?
so the topic, CrossFit. Everybody loves CrossFit, right?
Hashtag CrossFit, hashtag lifestyle.
Yeah. Hashtag doing it right. Hashtag going hard in the paint or whatever. It's just if you ever follow anyone on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter that is a CrossFitter, you have been beat over the head with their their crossfitting. And then all of the hashtags. It's funny. Everybody is some sort of social media marketing expert trying to get click views. And I'm
Right.
convinced that most people that are doing that are trying to get some sort of sponsorship, so they don't have to work and they can just put things on Instagram and be a celebrity in their own right. But
and start a podcast and get a following.
get a following podcast. But so this is interesting. The CrossFit Championships or competition, which is it's really popular CrossFit Games, and they usually give out gold medals to the winners. Well, this year they're going to be giving out pistols to the winners, guns.
Wow.
Now I'm assuming there's still going to be background checks and all those sorts of things, but assuming you pass them, you would get a Glock. And the story is basically trade in your gold for your Glock, your gold medal for your Glock. And people are pretty upset, and some people are pretty happy about it. I think 20,000 people signed a petition online demanding that they don't do the Glock prize.
Wow.
And I think in the CrossFit competition, it's run by a Navy SEAL and a couple other people, or former SEAL.
Yeah.
He's a director, at least.
Yep.
And they're pretty upset about it, these people, because obviously, they don't want guns to be involved. But there's also, I think there's a shooting competition in the CrossFit Games, because it's not, I think they have a philosophy of like fit mind and fit body. So if you're fit, then you're also able to protect yourself, etc. I don't know. I mean, how do you feel about it? I don't know how I would feel about them bending and not doing it, because it's a private entity. The petition is a petition. Yeah. They can do what they want, assuming they go through the legal proceedings to make sure people that get them are background checked and all of that and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
I don't know. Part of me feels like it's just an ad for Glock, because they could have said any pistol, right? They could have said, like the news report especially could have said, "Hey, you're getting a gun," or whatever the case. To me, it sounds like it's sponsored by Glock, and it's a good way for them to get more publicity. Although they're pretty popular, they don't really need it. But then again, neither does Coca-Cola, and their ads are everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think it's an ad sort of move. But I mean, what do you think?
Well, I might have a little bit to, maybe not insight to add, but I was one of those people polluting people's social media feeds with CrossFit posts at one point in my life.
Right.
Let me tell you, that Kool-Aid is not to be messed with.
Right. They definitely rope you in. And I mean, I'm not a fit dude necessarily by any the CrossFit standards, so I can't say it didn't work for me, it did work for me, or anything like that. But I mean, if you've done CrossFit, then yeah, why don't you get a little bit of info on how that psyche works?
Yeah, well, it's a very obviously competitive, very communal, very very tribal, you could say. And a lot of the heads of the CrossFit who started it are military affiliated. I know that a lot of the early sponsors of CrossFit Incorporated were having to do with military. And that also goes with Reebok, the CrossFit's main sponsor that they work with. Right. They do a lot with a Wounded Warrior, and then also with things like the Spartan race. Those are pretty closely related, and all of those are pretty.
Like is Tough Mudder in that too, and a couple other ones.
Tough Mudders, they're an obstacle course.
It's not related
race.
At all.
They're not directly related. They're a competitor to Spartan Race, but Spartan Race is with Reebok. Reebok's also with CrossFit. So they're kind of all involved.
Yeah, that makes
sense. So they're very military affiliated, very so I guess when I first heard about this, I wasn't very surprised, because when you subscribe to CrossFit to any deep level, you see who's in charge. You see people like the Dave Castros, who are just like these no nonsense, really, I don't know, dare I say, egotistical kind of people, and they're very serious. They very support the vets, and they very support the right to protect oneself. So this is probably, if I had to speculate, and that's really all I can do, but I would say that, it probably has something to do with sponsorship. I don't know whether that's something that was offered from the Glock side, or if it was something that CrossFit went and sought out. They went to go, hey, we're looking to, to give guns to the people who can we get on board. But I'm thinking that it was probably an idea by CrossFit Incorporated, and maybe in lieu of these events that have been happening lately. There's a lot of talk about gun control. Once again, anytime there's a shooting, that's what people talk about. Ranging from Orlando to the police shootings. A lot of the things that are going on are really stimulating that conversation. And if I had to guess, I would say that this is some sort of response to that. And I think a sponsorship probably has something to do with it. I think Glock probably has the most to offer, and maybe has the closest model to what CrossFit's doing.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight to that sort of a story. And because it goes beyond, like, it's very easy on the face to be like, oh, it's about guns. It's totally a gun push. There's these CrossFitters are just gun toting, conservative crazies. And I think that the angle is much, much bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's just, you don't see that pop in the popular news very much. I mean, because there are definitely tons of competitions and prizes and giveaways, etc., where there are guns involved. I mean, regularly. There's all over the country. But I mean, every single one of them has a background check piece, and you have to be vetted, all those sorts of things. So
right.
that doesn't bother me nearly as much as the product placement kind of does a little bit, and it's just sort of promotion.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of numb to that anyway. I mean, there's product placement is maybe one of the oldest tactics to get people to sell, and we've almost become numb to it, I think, as a society. But nonetheless, all the big players are still doing it because they're always going to be the ones relevant. They have the most capital to do that kind of stuff with.
Right.
You're always going to see the Ford trucks on the movies, or the Chevys, or
Toyota, or whatever
kind of things.
Yep.
So it's proven to be effective. I think people will still do it. I think we're on the same page there.
Yeah. It's always one of those hot topics whenever there's ever any sort of firearm, especially recently, with the things that have happened. And it's just sad that people are incredibly upset about guns the way they are. But they sort of forget that people have been killing each other for thousands of years, and honestly, the murder rates are pretty low now in America. So
yeah,
I mean, you could say what you want about, hey, guns are a bad thing, and et cetera. That's fine, but you can't deny that the murder rates are down, and we live in a pretty safe world, a pretty safe country rather, compared to the world.
Yeah.
I mean, like in Turkey, they had a coup. When's the last time we had a coup here? Never.
Yeah.
Or at least not since the Civil War. I don't know. It's just we kind of I think we lose perspective and get pretty short-sighted sometimes, because it's a cause to get behind. And that's fine. There are people that have experienced loss related to weapons, and it's hard. But in all honesty, we live in a pretty safe country, and I don't get too upset about that.
Yeah.
So, moving on a little bit, what's on your agenda there, Justin, for the next topics?
Well, we've pretty much covered a lot of the stuff that I was bringing to the table today. I thought we can get a little one-on-one discussion about the political climate, about the GOP, since that's the big trending thing right now.
Yeah. That's basically how we feel about that.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely personally feel about it, but here's what I have to say. When it comes to these trending topics, you and I both know we've both been involved in, having personal projects and things online where, you don't want to fall into the trap of only talking about the trending stuff. But I think that when you have a fair and balanced point of view and you're having good discussion, I think maybe that kind of thing is needed when it comes to the topics we're not just going to gravitate to, OMG, I hate Trump.
Yeah. Because then what does that do? It just perpetuates the stereotypes that maybe are wrong, and it also doesn't necessarily talk it out, right? It's we don't want to be a bullhorn, right? We want to be a conversation. So
Right. Yeah, I think that a good thing that we could to learn how to more um, adopt and try to dive more into is the like you're saying, you really just emphasize talk it out. Like we should talk out different angles that you're not just going to see when you go to these big media outlets. Like let's just fully talk about a subject and not from one particular angle. Let's try to get a broader point of view, if nothing else. And I think that there needs to be some smaller players in the game that can, like your third parties and those in that sort of parallel. There needs to be some perspective added from somebody, because we know that these big players aren't going to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a couple of shows out there that do, but the reason I think why that people don't do that is when you sit on the fence or you try and be unbiased as much as you can, or two sides. It doesn't make for fun TV sometimes, right? Because
Right.
or fun podcast, because it's not polarizing enough. So, but I'm okay with that, and I prefer to be honest. And so we're gonna take a side. Try and take both sides, and because the only way you could ever make an opinion is understand the other sides.
Right.
So we're doing a real casual thing today. It's not our normal structured format. Just sort of impromptu podcast time, and it's talk it out time. So that's what we do. And if there's something you want to talk about, you can tweet us at Talk It Out Pod or hashtag Talk It Out Pod. Or on Facebook as well, Talk It Out Pod. Our website is talkitoutpod.net, and you can shoot stuff at us, and we'll respond. If you care what we have to say, if you don't, we'll still respond. So it's a lot of fun to interact with people. We're trying out the YouTube thing as opposed to Blab, which Blab was a pretty cool platform, but it didn't seem to have legs. So we got, that's what happens when you get it on a beta.
Yeah.
And so it's just the way it is. It's fine.
Yeah, that's the risk you take when you try to get in. It's nice to try to be on the front end of something that has great potential, and I think that Blab was that way. I think that the developers were just finding that it was ending up being more expensive, and that they decided that their money is better spent chasing other technologies. So I mean that's unfortunate for people like us who are trying to ride a wave, so to speak. But fortunately we're adaptable, and we can find ways to accomplish what we're trying to do.
So I guess we're getting here at close to 40 minutes or so, I think. Were there any other things we wanted to bring up before we signed off?
I think we did covered all the main points here. I mean, I've been kind of glancing through, seeing what's going on in the world, and I mean, this is kind of, especially in the sports world, which is kind of my go-to. It's kind of a lull. This is a lull time in the sports world. There's the highlight of last week was, I don't know, the ESPYs.
Yeah, and then you had the All-Star game.
Yeah.
Which is, a lot of people, it's kind of a joke, but I mean, it's still, I mean, there's a meaning now behind baseball, because the winner gets home field in the first game of the World Series, National or American League, right? So that's the way that goes. But it's just not as big of a deal as it used to be.
Yeah.
But I mean, the home run derby's fun, and that was great. I liked seeing the Yankees pitch so well in the closing part of the All-Star. But yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of people get a little upset because basketball's over and and things like that. But the Olympics are coming up, which is a lot of fun. I really like the Olympics. I love watching track and field. It's just it's ultimate display of athleticism, and outside of your normal sports you might see.
Right. Totally.
So I mean, and that's kind of been a mess in Rio. Did you see the person running the torch and somebody tried to put the torch out with a fire extinguisher?
No, I didn't see that.
Oh yeah, so I mean, I guess it's pretty typical, par for the course of Brazil, I suppose. It's a rough area sometimes. They're running the torch. They have some guards running with them, and somebody runs off the side of the street with a fire extinguisher and tries to put the torch out. They just spray them with fire extinguisher.
What?
And it was it was ridiculous. And they tackled the guy, but I mean, I don't think I've ever seen that.
No, that's kind of crazy. I mean, obviously a planned stunt that fortunately was
Yeah.
thwarted. I
Yeah,
mean,
they didn't.
that's
They got a pretty good coverage on the torch, and the torch stayed lit. So good for the torch.
yeah, right on for the torch.
And
You
the
know,
person holding
let that be symbolic for all you trolls out there.
Yeah, and the person holding it kept pushing forward. I mean, they got a little, freaked out when a fire extinguisher, but the person, kept pushing forward, kept running, and the cops, or I think it was cops or security guards, got rid of them. But that whole area is kind of a mess. They put up a retaining wall. We kind of talked about that the other episode, but I think the city is I'm sure some of the people are pretty upset, right? Because they don't get any time of day otherwise, and now that now the freaking the Olympics are there and they're blocking it off, they're changing bus routes, all those sorts of things, and making it difficult for the country, or at least for that part of the country.
Yeah, we definitely touched on that last week.
Yeah,
and I'm pretty stoked for the Olympics. I mean, and on one end, it's kind of lame that suddenly people care about all these things that they never cared about before. But on the other side, I get excited that when things like this happen, that kind of unite everybody. Where people care about things that like everyone kind of cares about. It just brings kind of a sense of unity, and so I think that's cool. I mean, I'll take
it's
the
funny.
Olympics over something like Pokemon Go being the thing that has to unite people.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny because it's both. It unites, but it also polarizes nations a little bit because you get pretty nationalistic with it.
Right.
You get pride in your country, but as long as you can be good sports, I think that's okay. If you're a good sport about it and you're not malicious or vengeful about winning and things like that, it's healthy, and you come together as a country, come together in the world in one place, and at the end of the day, it's just people doing incredible athletic feats. So you got to love that, I would hope.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and so I guess we'll hope to have another episode next week, or maybe another one at the end of this week. Talk it out. Would be nice. Maybe we'll have Josh and Tyler back, hopefully, to add more perspective than just us two. Because right now, it's got that NPR feel. You and I were just sort of having this conversation, and the only thing we're missing is like a really dead room sound, and some cheap soft jazz, or smooth jazz, and I don't know, a topic like I don't know, here's Jesse Ray's rendition of the classic folk song Banjo on My Knee, played on a ukulele. Or just whatever, like it's when you just have two people, the dynamic changes a little bit, and so it's nice to get more people, more involvement, people of the crowd or anyone listening, you can get
it's
that
less work, that's for sure.
With just two of us, casual.
No, I'm saying it's less work with more people because you can kind of chill out a little bit.
Yeah,
you got someone who's particularly fueled by a particular topic, and you just let them go, and then, but I mean, I like the 2-person thing too. I think that one of the benefits of having multiple people is that we can kind of be flexible with who's available, and we can make it work.
Yeah, and if there's a time where we're unavailable, maybe Tyler and Josh talk, and they're in the middle of the country, so maybe that changes a little bit for their time zone. But yeah, no topic is off limits the way I see it, and we talk about anything.
Absolutely.
So, any other last thoughts we want to get into?
I think we're pretty clean here. I got nothing else. I say we wrap this thing up.
All right, let's wrap this thing up. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. We will talk to you the next time we talk it out.